I once was almost involved with a woman about 25 years ago
Shocking.
who about 6 or 7 years ago I saw online. She'd moved to another
Oh,
country.
dude, that's so that's always so. Yeah. Okay, go
She'd
on.
moved to another country,
Yeah.
and she was married or whatnot, and she was plotting out. Uh, she was plotting out a novel. She was a poet. She had minor potential, but she's one of these people who would have post-its and she'd have a timeline all over her
Mhm.
room, and she's photographing it. And the novel was a lesbian version of Mrs. Ahab from Moby Dick, and it's like not only is the idea ridiculous and probably been
Yeah.
hacked up, but plotting this out, that's not the
Oh,
way you're going to write a novel. Having said that, though, the end results are what matter. What
yeah.
works for me, my own personal way of approaching things, is not necessarily going to be yours or
Yeah.
10,000 other people who want to write way. For example, when I've written probably about 12 to 15 short story collections. When I wrote those collections, in order to get a unity to the stories, I would
Mhm.
write each draft of each story, 1 to 15 stories or whatever it was, draft
Yeah.
one, draft, and that way you're sort of
Like
like
planting
cross stitching
seeds.
things, and even without knowing that you're doing it, rather than write one story end, one story end, doing it that way, and because that's what you'd call now a little Easter egg for a reader, in that
Yes.
in story three has
Yes.
a commonality with story 11 that it wouldn't have
Weird
had.
chaos.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so the end results are what matter. How you get there is less important than getting there correctly. Another point I just want to make too, again, just to get this stuff as it's coming to me, is it's important. It's very important as a writer or any artist to learn the craft,
Yes.
learn it, read the masters, learn it, know who you like or who you think is good, what you want to take from them. But then at some point, if you go through it and you develop your own style, you have to unlearn. You have
Yeah.
to unlearn the stuff so that you can break these rules, because these hard and fast rules that are initially a ladder that helps you climb up can become a prison. And so there are often times I've gotten poems or something from some young writer, and they'll say, "Well, I did just what you did in my poem," and I'll say, "Yeah, but my poem is a great poem. Yours isn't because," and I'll list off three or
I
four
did what
things.
you did. Aren't
Yeah,
I great too?
yeah, and I'm all for the old saying about great artists steal, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. But you have to know how to steal. And let's see, one other thing. Oh, uh, and because everyone is different, everyone's going to have their own way to work. One of the things, for example, that I often found that's very detrimental in writing groups or writing classes is when I give critique, especially to young writers who are going to be more
Mm.
impressionable. I never try to Schneiderize their poems. I'll tell you, here's what I would do
Yes.
with this line. But since you seem to be aiming for A, B,
Mhm.
or C, here's how you'd go to get to A. Here's how you'd go to get to C. Here's how you go to D. Now you may have F, G, H in mind,
Yes.
and then we can hash something out. But you never want to, as a critic, in the pre-final stage, look at someone's work and say and try to impose yourself in it. Why would I want more writers who are like me? Not only would the fact that would it make my writing less valuable if someone
Yes.
could convincingly imitate me, but it's pointless because they're not going to have my experiences. So,
Mhm.
for example, just to use, I mentioned the gangster novel. I grew up in a Goodfellas neighborhood. I was actually talking with a coworker yesterday night on a break, and I was talking about some of the gangsters I knew as a kid growing up. But he grew up in Cleveland and moved to Texas, and he's worked in the service industry before he ended up in retail like me. And so his experience is going to be totally different. He's also a metalhead. He's still 50 something years old. Goes to 1980s metal bands concerts. So he's not going to have the same experiences as me, and neither are other writers. So yes, it's a cliche to write what you know, but that's when you start out.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know if I'm just writing what I know, why would I be writing about Catherine the Great? You know?
Yes.
So you have to be able, you have to know that yourself, know the flexibility of where you are in your life. And it's one of those things that, unfortunately, you have to constantly, things are parallaxing around you. You read a book, you might read a piece of shit like from someone like Volman, but you might you might say, you know, this short story that so and so wrote is a piece of crap. But if he had done Conceit One, had dropped off the last 2 pages and had done these 2 other things, this might have been an interesting way to come to something of value. And you know, the problem is we want, in America, and just as human beings, we want simple answers. And when you're making art, in my mind, art is the highest pursuit that human beings can do, even more so than science, because it reflects who we are. If there are immutable scientific laws, who knows? But if there are, then no pursuit of them can be as individuated as that Wyeth painting I mentioned, or what I'm doing. So arts and sciences, but especially the arts, are the way we measure civilizations and their success or not. And here in the 21st century America, and I don't want to get off on bullshit with Trump and whatnot, but long before he became a president, simple answers. We just want the very idea that you would have MFA writing mills says how we want to churn things out in a Henry Ford like fashion.